This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And this week, as excitement builds for Call of Duty Black Ops 6 later this year, he's taking a look at the weapons of Black Ops 1 and 2.
I don't like that reload, the way it pops out to the side. It does so much scope for that falling out of the weapon there. This is very much the era of COD where guns went seriously wacky.
Let us know what other games or guns you'd like to see Jonathan break down, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more Black Ops breakdowns coming very soon. Right, let's take a look at the weapons from Call of Duty Black Ops 1 and 2.
And we're out of the gate with something quite wacky here that we haven't got an example of. It's the high standard Model 10. I can't speak to its realism. These effectively bullpup conversions. It's not a conversion per se, but it's an adaptation of an existing action with just a butt plate stuck on the back of them. We've got something else that has that configuration, and they never look right. I will say it's if you're looking for an unusual Cold War era shotgun design, it's a good one. Great big flappy carrying handle is a bit of a distraction. I don't know if the real thing flaps around like that.
I remember back in the day, a lot of people ran this thing akimbo.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, one of the theoretical advantages of a bullpup is one-handed operation in an emergency. You could shoulder it and just use one hand. And the same applied the Viper submachine gun, Second World War, even things like the Uzi, you know, which is not a bullpup, but foreshortened, the idea that you can one-hand the thing in it if you need to. So the so-called Enfield, this is a strange one because in a way, the 2D graphic for the gun is more faithful to the real thing than the actual 3D model. But it's not bad. Enfield, fair enough. This was part of the Enfield Weapons System, EWS. The overarching Ministry of Defense program name was Small Arms for the 1980s, or SA-80. Still have the SA-80 in service today. The in-house Royal Small Arms Factory Enfield name for this family of weapons was the Enfield Weapon System, or the Enfield 4.85mm weapon system, or the 485 for short. So called because it fired not 5.56, but a sort of tweaked version of 5.56 with a 4.85mm diameter projectile. Longer, but slimmer. Ballistically, at least in terms of getting a shot on target, very slightly superior to the period 5.56, but not enough to make any difference. So that went away. They then went to 5.56, and then the whole thing was completely redesigned in 1978 to the SA-80 that we know today. Black Ops has or depicts something pretty close to this. This is the XL64 individual weapon or rifle from that original incarnation of the SA-80 or the EWS program. This one is fitted with the maximum length butt plate. So if you ignore the pad there, that's pretty similar to the butt arrangement on the game gun. It has the FAL style magazine catch at the back, much better than the one that was adopted that guys would end up losing magazines as a result of because there was no shroud around it. All fixed later, but much slimmer design to the big boxy wedge-shaped SA-80 that we got. You can see the grip is very much the profile that's on the game gun. That shape is very different to the more angled green, obviously plastic version that came later. The major point of departure on the game gun is that it doesn't have this not very good paddle safety. They went back to the push button safety that was on the original prototype of the SA-80 for the final version. So you just push it left and right. And I think that's represented on this model, if not used. There are other issues with this though. So, I mean, the handguard isn't really the right shape. It's too squared. The design of the receiver, or the body in British terminology. So this is just a bent steel pressing with welded in trunnions or supports inside it. You don't therefore get a seam across the top like I see in front of me here. This is a much squarer shaped receiver with a weird seam down the top of it, which shouldn't be there. The rail on it is completely different to the one that's on the actual gun. But, it's got all the sort of features that allow you to recognize it as what it's purporting to be. So the barrel band on the handguard at the front is correct. proportions of the flash hider and the barrel are pretty good. Handguard's roughly the right shape. And unlike a lot of Cold War era rifles, it was of course designed from the outset to have an optical sight on it, so I don't have to get all ranty about weird optics. And of course we have the classic COD of this era issue with the iron sights being generic 2000s era backup iron sights that are just slapped on the gun. The rear one, at least, in this case. Veterans, of course, will be wincing at the drills because that's not how you reload. Although it is pretty close to how you reloaded the EM2, because that was designed to be operated with the right hand. So you take your hand off the pistol grip, which we would never do today. And I kind of like the idea that this is maybe an alternate reality where this version did make it into service, or it's a prototype that you're taking out for whatever reason. Clearly, if you're doing some critical Black Ops mission, you don't want to be using prototype firearms. But, you know, I was pleased to see it in the game at the time. The optic is interesting. It's somewhat modeled on the prototype SUSAT, but it looks much more like the issue SUSAT, so that's a bit weird. It does have the great big pointer that people look at today and go, why is that there? But you can see that there's a slit down the middle of it that allows you to not fully obscure your target. And it was one of the early 4-power, very robust military optical sights. So arguably the best feature of the SA-80 as it actually came into service. Yeah, we covered this one in the AR-15 video that we did, and I think I ranted at length about it. Now, I think I was probably too critical of it last time. Having a look on the racks, I've actually found this this period example here, complete with sling flapping around. Nice flappy sling that you can't use, hanging in the breeze, and a nice bit of webbing over your bolt catch, so you can't actually chamber the next round on a fresh magazine. That's what you want. This is entirely period. I'm being extremely flippant about this. Nice to see slings on firearms in games, and at this era, seeing a nice textured bit of webbing sling on a firearm is pretty cool. However, I just don't understand why it's wrapped around the gun like that and not connected at the front, so you can't use it. Famously, the SAS would, for a period at least, carry their M16s with no sling, and they were obliged to just carry it everywhere. They preferred to not have a sling on the weapon, so that might be more appropriate. Having a sling on there that isn't actually set up correctly and is actively getting in your way, it's actually modeled with the sling in the way of the bolt catch, with a nice big strip of nylon in the way of your bolt catch. Can you still operate the bolt hole? Oh, you can. It does work, but it's not ideal. That takes me to actually more of an elephant in the room, which is the carry handle. So this does have an ACOG on it, which is not really period appropriate, but they should have left the carry handle. It looks awesome. It's Cold War all day long, and it was designed from the outset in the 50s, the late 50s, to have a little hole and an adapter that was on there from the beginning. So this thing should absolutely have a carrying handle. Prototype flat top ARs were around, what, early 90s? It should probably have just gone for something like an XM177, like this period example here, with the iconic moderator on the end, or any of the myriad of Colt carbines that existed by this point. Other than this is a real mishmash. It's almost like they went, right, we need an M4, so we need to work backwards from there. So we'll make it look like a prototype rail thing on the top, but we'll keep the general configuration. Flash suppressor is neither an A2 flash suppressor like a M727 or a 733 or something, nor is it the XM moderator. It's something in between. So I could bore you all to death for longer, but this was a real missed opportunity for me. I remember playing it at the time, being a bit disappointed with it. I do think Black Ops did a good job with its cartridge case ejection. You get that barely visible blur of cases flying out of the gun. Given the field of view you have, though, you're still seeing too much brass, really. Very much of the era is that dipping the gun down to drop the mag out thing. I'm not sure why they picked that up, but I don't think I've ever seen that in real life, where it's a sort of a like that. That wouldn't really help. Doing that kind of, if anything, supports the back of the magazine and makes it stay in a bit. Just have it drop free, because they mostly do. Or have the player animation strip it out. Now this I don't remember. The 203 grenade launcher on this cursed carbine has a really weird handguard setup. Very, very thick, round handguards. Don't look like anything I've seen in reality. what it should have. So this era of Colt carbine with a grenade launcher underslung, if one was fitted, would have the bottom handguard taken off, and a lot of them aren't capable of mounting a grenade launcher. A couple were, so in principle that's fine. You know, the XM177 series had the XM148 Colt grenade launcher attached to it in the late 60s. So a little shorty carbine with a grenade launcher is not in itself wrong, it's just how it's implemented. It's kind of irking me slightly.
Biplane ready for deployment.
This is one I had to look up. Not ashamed to admit that. We have 27,000 firearms here of all types from across history, whatever whatever my full name is these days. This is the OTS-2 Kiparis. It's a Soviet era design, designed in the 70s, but I don't think it saw any service. But if it did, it wasn't until post the 1980s when I think it's supposed to be appearing in the game. Although obviously multiplayer, who knows? So I know very little about it. I don't believe there's one in Western Europe / the UK. Ticks all the boxes though. Iron sights, although obviously not everything in this game sticks to iron sights, but it has the iron sights. Sheet metal boxy construction, looks right, because it kind of is right. It's from the same design era as the game, unlike a lot of the weapons. But it's a sort of, functionally, it's a kind of alternate take on the Scorpion. You know, that form factor, that PDW style configuration. You could probably have made it the Scorpion and no one would have minded, but they went for something a bit unusual, did some research.
Cambiando cargador.
Now, the Spectre is something we do have, and is, for me, one of the sort of ultimate classic Cold War designs. It screams that era, and it has the very cool coffin-esque quad to double stack magazine. A little bit reminiscent of the Sterling in terms of how it's engineered, but a different take, top folding stock. And with that folded out the way, we can see the game gun's pretty faithful, with the top cocking handle ears. That's actually a single piece cocking handle running in a track in the top of the receiver. It's an odd one because as you can see, the stock attaches to the rear sight protectors, and there are no holes on this model. So I'm not aware of a stockless variant of the Spectre. I'm not sure you're going to make a load of sight protectors that don't have holes in them just for that variant. Yeah. I'm not sure the magazine catch is actually being used. This is a weird gun in terms of the magazine catch placement inside the trigger guard. It looks like they might think that you need to press this bit of the magazine catch, but actually the bit that's shaped for being pressed has these grooves on it. It's designed to be reach in with the thumb, press, rip. So they've modeled it correctly, but doesn't look like it's being used. It looks like the mag's just getting ripped out, which is obviously impossible because there's a great big catch holding it in place, albeit with a fair bit of wobble. Which is a little alarming, to say the very least. I don't know if that's just our example. That's going to cause some functioning issues, I dare say.
Keep me covered!
KS-23 keeps showing up. I'm not sure I'd even heard of it when I first played the game. Massive bore shotgun. It comes up annoyingly frequently, considering that we haven't got one in the collection. It totally makes sense. It's like the iconic video game shotgun, but you know, if you represent it as being more powerful, as it is. I don't know. I think I might have given it even more recoil than is depicted here. It's like a sort of Warhammer shotgun. I always think it's a fictional shotgun that's real.
In the campaign, there's a moment where you shoot a helicopter with like a harpoon out the front of it. In the game, they use it to skewer the winged beast to take down a helicopter. But in reality, it's just to deploy a grappling hook.
Not usually a great idea to adapt a lethal weapon for a less lethal purpose like that. Grappling guns, I think we were let down as growing up, seeing guns shooting claws for climbing up the side of things all the time. The frequency with which they actually exist in real life turns out to be pretty slim, but a useful reminder that they do in fact exist, and sometimes you can shoot them off guns.
That's a kill.
Oh yeah, the weird green furniture put me off there, and I was wondering, why is the front sight moving back and forth? Well, because it's a loose take, probably one of the earliest cases of a COD game changing up the design for no reason. The AN-94, which we are very fortunate to have more than one example of. And sure enough, this whole section it won't recoil very much into the gun without being operated, but it's a rifle within a rifle. The whole, much like the HKG-11, the whole barreled action has to recoil within the receiver in order to queue up a second shot for the very fast rate of fire 2-round burst. So a gameplay reason to have this in a game. The, I guess, less damaging shots in theory, but you get 2 of them in roughly the same place, which was the loose design requirement of the AN. That muzzle device, by the way, isn't just for looks. That is a sort of vortex gas booster, muzzle booster. So the barreled action in the chassis is gas operated, but it's also recoil. It's also recoil operated. It's both at the same time. A really bizarre weapon to have actually been put into production. Whereas the G11, equivalent hyperburst type concept, did not enter service. The AN-94 did. People always say that this is like the next, or was intended to be the next iteration of the Kalashnikov, of the AK. There's almost nothing of the AK in this. All there is the AK-74 magazine. The pistol grip, I believe, is the same molding, albeit it's attached differently. The stock is not the same. Nothing of the furniture, the mechanism, even the barrel, none of that is AK. This is all Nikonov.
Shooter down.
Oh, weird. So this is a bit of a battlefield situation where they've tried to identify what a future weapon system might be based on what's available at the time and might become significant in the future. And without wishing to annoy anyone at FN, I'm not sure the FN Ballista was the right choice, retrospectively. It was entered into a US military trial and was not a successful design. I believe it's still being developed, I think, but ballistic CPU. So we have a low power variable optic. Well, more like a high power variable optic by the look of it. Yeah, with an optional lever to easily adjust zoom. I don't know if you can zoom with this though.
I don't know what the spirit level is really doing. The bubble doesn't move, but it is at least a nice detail that it shows the caliber of the round and the relative distance on the top of your computer. But the size of Call of Duty maps, in no world would you need ballistics, something to calculate ballistics.
No, and it's not really doing anything helpful for you as a video game sniper. Who cares what the distance is? It's not like you can adjust your scope.
The advantage in game is it reduces the sway when you're aiming down sights, which is obviously just completely disconnected to what the actual thing is.
I can almost picture how someone had got wind of ballistic computers, rangefinders, being used at this time. I thought, well, in the future they'll be more common. Let's incorporate one. And then through various meetings, I can imagine it got watered down to the point where it's just like an RPG style, changes the stats of your gun, which is a bit of a shame, really. And of course, 2025 is next year, and ballistic computers and optics have already surpassed what's being shown there.
C lockdown. Keep moving.
Okay, don't remember this one either. I'm sure I did play Black Ops 2. The Executioner. I mean, it's definitely doing great execution, as the old phrase goes. Looks like a Taurus Judge or something. The real reason for those super long cylinders on that series of revolvers is for different cartridge types. Typically, shotgun, small caliber shotgun rounds, or a revolver cartridge. Is that factoring in here in any way, or is it just a big old powerful Magnum thing?
It's exclusively using the shotgun rounds.
Okay, well at least that justifies its existence. It's typically 45 long Colt and 410 shotgun, and 410 shotgun is, shall we say, not tactically useful.
It is printed 410 on the back of the cartridge, so I suppose in some way it does tell you what caliber it is.
You can get 410 buckshot, but obviously you can't fit many pieces of buckshot into a little 41 caliber cartridge compared to, well, any proper shotgun round. In real life, if these are practical at all, they are for snake. So you snake shot, bird shot, that kind of thing. Something very close range for small animals. But they do look cool, dual wielded, that's for sure. We have one example of a very early member of the of this type with the long cylinder, but not the full product range, as it were, and not this type. This is odd. On the face of it, this is the M8A1. So in theory, per US designations, this is the XM8 having been introduced and then advanced to A1 configuration. And in the process, completely redesigned, because it doesn't really look much like an XM8. Bizarrely, the XM8 did enter service with the Malaysian Marines, I believe it was. So they're out there under their X designation, as far as I know, in actual service to this day. But to everyone else, they're this sort of unicorn gun prototype that never went anywhere. Albeit it is a fairly mild derivation from the G36, which you can see even in this heavily modified take. One thing they absolutely would have done to an A1 variant, had the M8 come into service, is replace the sort of pop port style accessory system where you had these sockets that were like cooling holes when they weren't full, and then you pop in an accessory, a proprietary accessory system that didn't rely on Picatinny rail out at the front, which we sort of do have again in the form of M-Lock and even Keymod, but would not have been a great move in retrospect. And so they would have absolutely replaced the front end of this very modular design. You could have upgraded it throughout its life with something more like that we see here. Overall, I kind of like this as a sort of sci-fi'd out G36, even more so than the XM8. Gives it that almost sort of pulse rifle vibe to it. And funnily enough, modern day G36 variants with the reinforced front end, different handguard, carry handle setup, different colors, sort of bronzy, dark, desert tan, have ended up looking a bit like this after all. Oh God, oh Lord, just realized what it is. So this, I had to remind myself, is a rare instance of locally developed Indian firearm. This is a semi-offshoot of the INSAS rifle program, only it's a different design. And they came up with a new cartridge called MINSAS, which was a sort of PDW large pistol cartridge. What you see here, pretty much. And it's not necessarily spot on. Don't have one to compare. So quite obscure, but again, trying to look at what might be prominent in the future, I guess. Unfortunately, a number of Indian designs seem to be sort of bogged down in development and don't end up in significant service, and I think this is one of them, unfortunately. So this is actually the Joint Venture Protective Carbine, JVPC. So they've gone MSMC, so JVPC. Not the snappiest name for a firearm. It's a distinctive design, though, with that great big knuckle bow trigger guard and a vaguely oozy, slightly AK-looking cues going on there. I can see why they chose it. I'm not sure about the leather wrap on the front of the trigger guard, though. Not sure what that's doing.
Kill confirmed. UAV on standby.
Oh, wow. That's some serious dispersion there. That's not even very far away, what you're shooting at there. And and this is a really compact, controllable weapon in a very controllable cartridge. And it is all over the shop. This is very much the era of COD where guns went seriously wacky. So clearly meant to be the P90 cartridge. Is that the stock P90 magazine? Although the size of it looks a bit weird. It's a fictional weapon. They've designed something almost completely new. Vaguely P90 styling to it. I don't like that reload, the way it pops out to the side. It does so much scope for that falling out of the weapon there. Very cool sci-fi reload, but very hard to like grab it as it pops out and make sure you don't fumble it. Even if you are discarding your empty magazines, emergency reload style. That top loading setup is a design challenge. We've seen a Kel-Tec P90 magazine pistol that came out where the whole top of the gun hinges open in order to access. P90, of course, has just an open rear with the sight bridge sitting over the top of where the magazine goes. This takes a third route of it popping out the side, which I'm not convinced by. That sling swivel is going absolutely crazy out there at the front. Cool design. I would prefer to see that in something like an anime, to be honest, than in a realistic shooter. I got comments last time I called Call of Duty realistic. I hope you know what I mean. I don't mean that it's milsim or a tactical shooter or anything of that nature, just that it's set either in the past or the present or the near future and is meant to make you feel like you're a real world soldier, not a sci-fi cyborg or something. That's all I mean by realistic. And that the weapons should, I think, be as close to the real thing as possible for fun and immersion. So it's our old friend, the Russian ballistic knife. Heavy air quotes, because if I remember rightly, this was actually invented in Florida. It's very much an American ballistic knife. Ballistic in the sense that it uses a giant spring to shoot its own blade. It's not a firearm. It is a real thing, though. And here is one, looking not very knifey. I dare not try to compress the blade into the handle on camera if this would go badly, at least for my laptop or camera. This is pretty close to the real life weapon. So that is the handle. Looks much like the end cap, but it's thicker. And we have these rings, these turned grooves and knurling over the top to give you a decent grip. They're all represented on there. All the proportions are all different, and there's no knurling on the unscrewable end cap there. There's a nice, what looks like a Soviet star on there. It's not on the originals. Incidentally, no one should feel bad for thinking that this was Russian, because the Ministry of Defense pattern room from which this came calls it, it's catalogued as Russia, knife, fighting, spring-propelled blade. So that's the handle. That's the latch for releasing the blade. So it's just a spring-loaded latch holding that under tremendous spring pressure, and it shoots out. Now, the thing you might not expect is that the blade actually looks like this. No holes in it, like in the game version. And this tube, essentially second handle, is necessary to actually lock it into place. And then the spring is captive on the blade. So it's not like just, like a throwing knife shoots out the end of the handle. No, most of the knife shoots out of the handle, and this goes flying down range. Not very far down range, not with any appreciable accuracy. So this is a novelty. And the blade itself is really wobbly. An interesting cultural artifact more than a weapon, I would say. It's funny to me that they actually went back and came up with a futuristic version of something that never really existed in the first place. It's a little hard to see how it's concealing a spring strong enough to actually do that. It's like they thought, well, that looks vaguely like a period 80s fighting knife, kind of. So let's just do a modern, tactical-looking, kind of Tanto-looking knife and just make that shoot its blade. I don't know that there's much thought gone into how it would actually work. And this whole reload, with both of them, this whole idea that you're left holding the handle and you grab another knife blade and you insert it. No, not happening. This is under tremendous spring pressure, even to get it to that point. And I would have to get it all the way down to there to latch it in. Realistically, you would have to jam this into a surface, control it as best you can, and use your whole body to force it until it clicks, hoping that it doesn't slip off and slice your fingers or go through your mum's crockery or something. I don't know. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Guns there from Call of Duty Black Ops 1 and 2. I think there's another one coming. We do have, some museums in the UK here at the Royal Armouries. We also have a website, social media channels, our own YouTube channel where there's more of me babbling away about firearms. You might also like to check out the app History of Weapons and War, which features us, Forgotten Weapons, Bloke on the Range, Cap and Ball channel, various channels I didn't mention that I'll feel bad about now, that you should definitely be watching either on YouTube or on that app. See you again next week.